The void above Cadia wept reality. Where once the proud fortress world had stood as bulwark against the tides of chaos, now only asteroid fields of cathedral ruins and blackstone fragments remained. The despoiler had broken the planet but failed to claim it, leaving the system a contested graveyard where Imperial and traitor vessels still clashed. In the shadow of the Cadian Gate, a new rift tore across the stars, different from the bile green warp storms that plagued the region. This wound in space manifested as a perfect geometric pattern, a dark fire blooming outward in concentric rings of absolute authority. The Imperial vessels detected it first, Auspex readings screaming warnings as energy patterns unlike any warp signature recorded in the Mechanicus archives surged through real space. Aboard the strike cruiser Emperor's Redemption, Captain Dre of the Ultramarines' 4th Company watched the anomaly with narrowed eyes. His armour hummed with activation runes as tactical projections flowed across his retinal display. The strike force had been dispatched to recover a relic from the Cadian ruins, not to witness another catastrophe. Warp transition unlike any recorded pattern. "Captain," reported the ship's navigator, her voice strained. "It bears similarities to a webway breach, yet possesses an underlying mathematical certainty impossible in the immaterium. The anomaly grew, its perfect geometric expansion, defying the chaotic nature of warp rifts. From its centre emerged a vast vessel, a dark monolith of impossible architecture. Its hull bore no recognizable markings of Imperial, Xenos, or traitor design. The structure seemed to radiate a cold, calculating malevolence that even hardened Astartes felt as an instinctive dread. "Priority signal from the Forge World, Stius 8, announced the communications officer. "Magos Dominus Veneratus claims their ancient scrying device is activated for the first time in millennia. They recognize this signature as the Omega pattern, a mathematical constant that predates humanity. Captain Deer made the sign of the Aquila. The Omnissiah protects. Inform Magos Veneratus that we will investigate this anomaly and determine if it threatens Imperial space." The words had barely left his mouth when the vessel opened fire. Not with lance batteries or torpedo spreads, but with a beam of concentrated darkness that moved with terrible intelligence. The crimson ray struck a nearby Imperial frigate, the Corona Imperialis, bypassing void shields entirely. The beam did not detonate or burn through, but instead seemed to erase the vessel from existence, leaving nothing but a perfect silhouette of negative space. "Throne of Terror," whispered the tactical officer. "The Corona Imperialis had 200 souls aboard. All vessels, evasive patterns," commanded Drava. "Prepare teleportarium for immediate deployment. We must understand what we face." A second beam lanced out, striking the drifting wreckage of a Chaos cruiser. Like the Imperial vessel before it, the traitor ship simply ceased to exist, its never-born occupants shrieking into nothingness. The geometric anomaly had fully stabilized now, forming a perfect circular gateway from which smaller craft began to emerge, each bearing the same alien architecture as the mothership. The Vox crackled with a transmission that cut through all encryption and command channels simultaneously. The voice that spoke was not merely amplified, but seemed embedded in reality itself, each syllable a law of physics that could not be disobeyed. "I am Darkseid, new god of apocalypse. Your universe has drawn my attention. Your wars are meaningless. Your gods are pretenders. All will submit to the anti-life equation. All will know Darkseid Island." Captain D felt the weight of those words press against his enhanced transhuman mind. The Ultramarines prided themselves on discipline and rationality, yet he found himself momentarily paralyzed by the absolute authority in that voice. He shook free of the sensation, remembering the mental fortitude training of Chaplain Cassius. "Brothers," he addressed his battle company over the command channel, "we face an entity claiming godhood. We have defeated such pretenders before. The Emperor protects. The alien crafts approach the Imperial fleet, each one unleashing crimson beams of annihilation. Void shields flared and failed against weapons that seemed to operate on principles beyond physical laws. The Emperor's Redemption shuddered as its own shield strained against the assault. "Teleport lock achieved on the primary vessel," reported the teleportarium master. "Terminator Squad Agathon ready for deployment." "Execute," ordered Dravir. The machine spirit's hunger for vengeance. 5 Terminators of Squad Agathon materialized within the alien vessel, stormbolters and power fists at the ready. Their helmet feeds showed a vessel unlike any they had encountered. its corridors seemingly designed to induce existential dread through their perfect geometries that somehow conveyed wrongness. Sergeant Agathon swept his stormbolter across the empty corridor. No resistance. Proceeding to locate Command Center, the squad advanced through the vessel, encountering strange humanoid beings in armor that resembled stylized versions of ancient Terran plate. These beings moved with inhuman precision and attacked without fear or hesitation. Bolter shells tore through the first wave, revealing them to be flesh and blood, albeit with physiologies that defied Imperial classification. "They bleed," confirmed Brother Tullian. "They can be killed." The Terminators fought their way deeper into the vessel, their tactical dreadnought armor weathering energy weapons that scorched ceramite, but failed to penetrate fully. For every enemy they slew, 3 more appeared, fighting with mechanical devotion rather than fervor or rage. "These are no cultists or Xenos breeds I recognize. Voxed Brother Menace. They fight like servitors with intact minds." As they approached what Ospey's readings indicated might be a command center, the corridor before them distorted. A figure emerged, hovering several feet above the deck, humanoid but massive. It wore blue armor adorned with strange symbols. Its helmet was distinctive with a finned crest, and a face that appeared almost sculpted from stone. "I am Kalibak, son of Darkseid," the figure announced, his voice a guttural challenge. "You dare board the vessel of the new god? Your deaths will be legendary." Sergeant Agathon raised his stormbolter. "In the name of the Emperor, identify your species and purpose in Imperial space." Kalibak laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally. "Your Emperor, another false god who abandoned his children. Darkseid is truth. Darkseid is inevitable." The alien warrior charged, wielding a staff that crackled with energy unlike any power weapon the estates had encountered. It struck Brother Tullen with impossible force, cracking his Terminator plate and sending him crashing into the bulkhead. The other Terminators opened fire, mass-reactive rounds detonating against Kalibak's armor, but causing only superficial damage. Sergeant Agathon engaged with his power fist, the energized gauntlet connecting with Kalibak's chest. The alien staggered but did not fall, countering with a blow that dented Agathon's pauldron and cracked his chest plate. The 2 warriors traded blows in the confined space, Kamite cracking and alien alloys buckling under forces that would have pulverized ordinary men. "You fight well, human," Kalibak growled, "but you have never faced the children of Apocalypse." A crimson beam flashed from his eyes, slicing through Brother Menace's arm at the elbow, severing it cleanly. The Terminator roared in pain, but continued firing his stormbolter one-handed, his arty's physiology and training overriding the trauma. Aboard the Emperor's Redemption, Captain Drake watched the helmet feed with growing concern. "Chaplain sees. Assess the entity they face." The chaplain studied the feed, his skull helm revealing nothing of his expression. "It claims divine lineage yet bleeds. Not Daemon, but something similar in aspect. Its reference to the Emperor suggests knowledge it should not possess. Recommend extreme prejudice. Agreed. Signal the strike force to withdraw and prepare cyclonic torpedoes." Before the order could be relayed, the main view screen flickered. The bridge crew gasped as reality itself seemed to bend around them. Standing on the command deck where nothing had been a moment before was a towering figure of such absolute presence that several mortal crew members collapsed to their knees. Darkseid had arrived. The being stood nearly 9 feet tall, his body a mass of sculpted grey stone, or perhaps living metal. He wore blue armor that seemed ceremonial rather than functional, yet radiated power beyond any artifice. His face was carved from the same grey substance as his flesh, features stern and immobile, save for burning red eyes that promised annihilation. He stood with hands clasped behind his back, the very picture of absolute authority. "Interesting," he said, his voice resonating through the ship's structure itself. "Your species has potential. Your genetic modifications impressive for such primitive science. Your resistance noteworthy. Captain drew his power sword, its disruption field humming to life. In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, I demand you identify yourself and your purpose." "God Emperor," Darkseid repeated, something like amusement in his terrible voice. "I have conquered worlds whose gods made similar claims. All kneel before Darkseid in the end." The captain charged, his enhanced transhuman speed carrying him across the bridge in a heartbeat. His power sword struck at Darkseid's neck with force enough to decapitate a Carnif effects. The blade connected but did not penetrate, stopping as if it had struck the heart of a neutron star. Darkseid did not move, did not flinch. His expression remained unchanged as the power field of the weapon sputtered and died against his skin. "Courage," he observed, "another quality I shall preserve when I remake this reality." His hand shot out with speed that even Art's reflexes could not track, closing around Dre's throat. The captain felt his gin-enhanced bones creak under pressure that could crush Terminator plate. "Your mind resists the equation," Darkseid continued. "A function of your modifications, perhaps, or your conditioning. It matters not. All variables will be solved." Chaplain Season the bridge guards opened fire, bolt pistols roaring. The mass-reactive shells detonated harmlessly against Darkseid's form, not even marring the smooth perfection of his armour. The being's eyes glowed brighter, twin beams of crimson light lancing out to strike the chaplain. The beams did not burn through ceramite or flesh, but seemed to bend in impossible ways, pursuing the chaplain as he attempted to dodge. When they struck, Zeus screamed, not in pain, but in existential horror. Where the beams touched, matter itself disintegrated, erasing his right arm and shoulder completely. "Omega effect," Darkseid stated, "the power to erase what is and dictate what will be. Your weapons are crude applications of kinetic force. Mine are expressions of cosmic law." Captain Deere, still held in the being's implacable grip, activated his armor's overload protocols. The fusion generator in his backpack would detonate with force enough to destroy the bridge and possibly the vessel. "For the Emperor," he gasped, meeting Darkseid's burning gaze without fear. "Death before dishonor." "Death," Darkseid replied, "is a concept I have transcended." His free hand touched Dravier's backpack. Impossible energies flowed and the building overload simply ceased. The fusion reaction stopped, not through mechanical interruption, but through what seemed like a rewriting of its fundamental properties. "You will serve," Darkseid stated, "as all things serve Darkseid." The being released the captain, who fell to his knees, transhuman physiology, struggling to compensate for injuries that went beyond physical trauma. Something had been damaged in his very being, a wound to the soul that even Art's healing could not address. "This vessel is now mine," Darkseid announced to the bridge crew. "Its machine spirits have been subsumed into my technique. Resistance has been calculated and dismissed. Throughout the Emperor's redemption, systems began to change. Cogitators displayed unfamiliar runes and servo-skulls fell from the air as their machine spirits were overwritten by alien algorithms. The ship itself shuddered as its very structure began to transform, clean imperial lines giving way to brutal geometric patterns. In the teleportarium, Terminator Squad Agathons suddenly materialized, their armor scorched and broken. 3 brothers remained standing, supporting Sergeant Agathon between them. The sergeant's armor was cracked open at the chest, revealing flesh that pulsed with unnatural energies. "Quarantine protocols," gasped the sergeant. "The alien Calabac. He infected me with something. Not warped taint, something else." Medicae adepts rushed forward, then stopped as they saw the strange symbols appearing on the sergeant's exposed flesh. Glowing equations wrote themselves on his skin, spreading like a mathematical virus. "The anti-life equation," Agathon whispered. "Loneliness plus alienation plus fear plus despair plus self-worth divided by mockery divided by condemnation divided by misunderstanding times guilt. Shame, time, failure, time, judgment equals futility. All is one in Darkseid." His brothers stepped back as Agathon straightened, his injuries seemingly forgotten. His eyes glowed with the same crimson light as the alien gods, and his voice took on the same resonant quality. "The equation cannot be resisted," he stated. "Logic dictates submission. Darkseid Island." Throughout the Cadian system, similar scenes played out across Imperial vessels. The alien mothership broadcast signals that bypassed void shields and Gellerfields alike, carrying not data, but mathematical proofs that rewrote the very concept of free will. Crewmen turned on their officers, chanting the components of the anti-life equation as they did so. Ship systems capitulated to the alien logic, their machine spirits subverted by principles that the Mechanicus would consider the darkest techno-heresy. Within hours, a quarter of the Imperial fleet had fallen under Darkseid's control. The transformed vessels turned their weapons on those that still resisted, creating a zone of expanding domination centered on the ruined world of Cadia itself. Upon the broken surface of that fortress world among cathedrals half swallowed by tectonic upheaval, something ancient stirred. The pylons of blackstone that had once held the Eye of Terror at bay resonated with new purpose as Darkseid's presence interacted with their nullfield properties. Darkseid himself materialized on the surface, standing amid ruins where Imperial Guard regiments still fought desperate holding actions against Chaos warbands. Both sides paused as the godlike being appeared, his very presence commanding attention that could not be denied. "This world stands at a junction between realities," Darkseid observed, "a nexus point where dimensions bleed together. Primitive technology yet effective in its application. The Blackstone. It will serve my purpose." A Chaos Lord of the Black Legion, resplendent in corrupted Terminator plate, adorned with trophies of 10,000 years, stepped forward. Mutations writhed beneath his armour, gifts of the dark gods he served. Interloper the Chaos Lord's snarled voice distorted by a vox grill corrupted by warp energies. "This world belongs to the true gods of chaos. The despoiler claimed it for the ruinous powers. Whatever godling you pretend to be, you will kneel before chaos or be destroyed." Darkseid turned his impassive gaze upon the traitor Astartes. "Your gods, entities of emotion given form through the belief of lesser beings, parasites feeding on the psychic emanations of primitives. They are not gods, they are symptoms." The Chaos Lord roared and charged, lightning claws extended, warp energy crackled around him as the ruinous powers invested their champion with a measure of their strength. He moved with speed that belied his massive armour, crossing the distance to Darkseid in a blur of ceramite and warp flame. Darkseid did not move to defend himself. The lightning claws struck his chest, energies designed to disrupt matter at the molecular level, clashing with the immutable substance of the new god. For a moment, reality itself seemed to waver as fundamental forces contested for supremacy. The Chaos Lord's lightning claws shattered, not broke or failed, but disintegrated into component atoms as the Omega effect flowed back through them. The traitor Astartes staggered back, staring in disbelief at the stumps of his gauntlets. "Impossible," he growled. "These were blessed by the dark gods themselves." "Your gods are absent," Darkseid replied, called to witness the obsolescence of their domain. The sky above Cadia shattered, not in the chaotic manner of a warp rift, but in geometrically perfect segments that peeled away to reveal a vista of fire and brutalist architecture. Apocalypse became visible through the breach, a world of flame pits and towering citadels where countless slaves toiled in perfect uniformity. At the same moment, the great swirling mass of the Eye of Terror rippled. Within its impossible depths, the Chaos gods stirred, sensing an intrusion into their domain. Kay's brass citadel trembled as the blood god roared his challenge. Tien's crystalline labyrinth reconfigured as the changer of ways calculated this new variable. Nurgle's garden withered at its edges as the Plague Father recognized a force antithetical to his nature. Slenish's palace of pleasure darkened as the Prince of Excess felt the anti-life equation deny the very concept of sensation. The Chaos Lord fell to his knees, his connection to his patron suddenly severed without the sustaining energies of the warp. The mutations that had been his pride began to wither, causing him agony as they collapsed in on themselves. "What have you done?" he gasped. Blood running from eyes that had seen the glory of the warp now reduced to mere mortal orbs. "I have introduced order to chaos," Darkseid answered, "a superior paradigm that will bring unity to this fractured reality." The Imperial Guardsmen who had been fighting the Chaos forces found themselves equally affected by Darkseid's presence. Their lasguns lowered not by choice, but by an overwhelming mathematical certainty that resistance was futile. The equation worked through them, stripping away hope, faith, and the will to oppose the inevitable. Only one group maintained their resistance. From the ruins of a fallen cathedral emerged a squad of Sisters of Battle, their power armour gleaming despite the dust of battle. At their head strode Canoness Vera of the Order of the Ebon Shroud, her face a mask of righteous determination beneath her helm. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind," she called out, voice amplified by her armour's vox. "Identify yourself, abomination." Darkseid turned to regard the newcomers. "Faith, another variable in the equation. Your belief empowers you in this reality. An inefficient use of psychic potential, but noteworthy." "Heretic," the Canoness replied, raising her bolt pistol. "Your words condemn you. The Emperor protects." She opened fire, her sisters joining her with bolters and flamers. The space around Darkseid erupted in explosions and Prometheum flame obscuring him momentarily. When the smoke cleared, he stood unmarked, the ground around him scorched, but his form untouched. The Emperor protects, he repeated, a being of immense psychic potential, who sacrificed mobility for omniscience, who abandoned physical form to maintain a failing empire who demands worship while unable to acknowledge it. Your god is a battery depleted and failing. The canoness raised her power sword. Blasphemy, sisters. Purge this filth with holy fire. The sisters charged, their faith manifesting as tangible power that even Darkseid could perceive. This was not merely belief, but a force of reality in this universe, a connection to the same warp that empowered the Chaos Gods, but channeled through rigid devotion rather than emotion. Darkseid raised his hand, and the ground beneath the sisters erupted, not in explosion, but in transformation, the very rock and soil reconfiguring into the same brutal architecture as his vessels. The sisters maintained their charge even as the terrain shifted beneath them, their power armor compensating for the changing battlefield. The canoness reached Darkseid first, her power sword describing a perfect arc aimed at his neck. Unlike Captain D's attack, her blade carried not just disruptive energy, but the manifest power of faith. Where the Ultramarine had failed, her blade drew first blood, opening a shallow cut on Darkseid's granite flesh. Interesting, Darkseid observed, catching her blade in his bare hand on the second swing. Your faith creates a resonance that briefly elevates you beyond your physical limitations. He crushed the power sword, the adamantium blade shattering in his grip. With his other hand, he seized the canoness by her gorge, lifting her armoured form as easily as a child would a doll. But faith is merely another variable in the equation, he continued. When properly factored, it becomes not a strength but a vulnerability. His eyes blazed with crimson light, twin beams lancing out not at the canoness but at her sisters. The Omega beams struck with perfect precision, erasing the flamer fuel canisters on their backs. The resulting explosions tore through their ranks, scattering ceramite and flesh across the transformed landscape. The canoness screamed in fury and grief, her faith manifesting as a shimmering golden aura that pushed back against Darkseid's grip. For a moment she broke free, landing on the ground before him with her combat knife drawn. "The Emperor protects," she snarled, attacking once more with speed born of righteous fury. "Faith against certainty," Darkseid responded, evading her strikes with minimal movement. An experiment worth conducting. He allowed her to attack, studying the interplay of her faith-powered strikes against his cosmic nature. Each time her blade connected, it drew a minuscule amount of his essence, something that had not happened since he had ascended to godhood. "Your Emperor," Darkseid noted, "has aspects of the Source in his composition, a fragment of true divinity, perhaps enough to grant his followers a measure of real power." The canoness did not respond with words, but with continued attacks, each blow carrying the full measure of her devotion. Around them, the surviving sisters rallied, adding their bolt of fire to their leader assault. Darkseid permitted this resistance, observing the phenomenon with academic interest. However, he continued, faith requires an object. When that object is removed from the equation, faith becomes untethered. Observe. He raised his hand toward the sky. The breach that had revealed Apocalypse widened further, expanding to encompass the entirety of the Cadian system. Through this impossibly vast opening, a new celestial body became visible, a construct of technology so advanced it appeared supernatural even to those familiar with Architect. The object was a vast weapon, a cannon of proportions that dwarfed battleships. At its heart, pulsed energies that distorted space-time, bending light around it in sickening patterns. This was the weapon that had destroyed countless worlds in Darkseid's home reality, the Apocalyptian planet killer. "The final variable," Darkseid announced, "terror." The meaning of his words became clear as the weapon oriented itself, its targeting systems locking onto coordinates far beyond the Cadian system. Even at interstellar distances, the sisters recognized the significance. The planet killer was targeting Holy Terror itself, the throne world of the Imperium and seat of the God Emperor. "No," gasped the canoness, her attack faltering for the first time. "You cannot. All that is possible is permitted to Darkseid," he replied. "Your faith draws power from your God. Your God draws power from the collective belief of humanity, a self-sustaining loop that has maintained your empire despite its inefficiencies." When terror falls, that loop will be broken. The canoness renewed her attack with desperate intensity. But Darkseid had tired of the experiment. He caught her knife hand and crushed it. Ceramite gauntlet and flesh pulverized in his grip. With his other hand, he touched her forehead, imparting a fraction of the anti-life equation directly into her mind. "Witness the truth," he commanded. "Life equals futility through the anti-life equation." The canoness screamed, not in physical pain, but in spiritual agony, as mathematical certainty warred with unshakable faith. The conflict ravaged her mind, faith, and equation, cancelling each other in a destructive resonance that left her collapsed and broken on the transformed ground of Cadia. Darkseid turned his attention to the planet killer, which had completed its targeting sequence. A pulse of energy built at its core, reality distorting around the accumulating power. The new god raised his hand to give the command that would end the Imperium of Man. Before he could speak, a new presence manifested on the battlefield. Unlike Darkseid's geometric precision, this arrival came with a thunderclap of displaced air and the smell of ozone. Standing between Darkseid and the fallen canines was a giant in golden armor, his presence radiating authority that matched even the new gods. The Primarch reboot Guilliman had come to Cadia. The avenging sun stood resplendent in the armor of fate, the Emperor's sword blazing with psychic fire in his hand. His face was stern beneath his laurel crown, eyes taking in the transformed landscape and the alien god with analytical precision. "Name yourself Invader," Guilliman demanded, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of authority. "By what right do you threaten the domains of mankind?" Darkseid regarded the Primarch with what might have been respect. A Primarch, one of the Emperor's artificial sons, genetically engineered demigods created to conquer a galaxy. Reboot Guilliman, architect of empire. "You know of me," Guilliman observed. "The Emperor's sword held ready. Then you know I am not easily defeated. Whatever powers you possess, whatever godhood you claim, you stand in Imperial space, you threaten Imperial lives. This ends now." "Another experiment," Darkseid replied. "The Emperor's genecraft against new god science. Omega effect against psychic potential. I accept your challenge, Primarch." Guilliman moved with speed that belied his massive form. The Emperor's sword arcing toward Darkseid with perfect precision. The blade forged by the Emperor's own hand and imbued with a fragment of his psychic might struck Darkseid's chest with force that would have split a Baneblade. Unlike the weapons that had come before, the Emperor's sword bit deep, opening a wound in Darkseid's stone flesh from which flowed not blood, but dark energy that resembled liquid shadow. The new god's expression changed for the first time, eyes widening fractionally in what might have been surprise. The Emperor's essence, Darkseid noted, more potent than I calculated. He counterattacked, his fist striking Guilliman's pauldron with force that cracked the ancient ceramite. The Primarch staggered, but maintained his footing, centuries of warfare having prepared him for opponents of godlike strength. He pivoted and struck again, the Emperor's sword leaving another burning wound across Darkseid's torso. "You bleed," Guilliman observed. "Whatever you are, you can be killed." "Death is a concept I transcended millennia ago," Darkseid responded. "This form can be damaged, but I am more than mere physicality." His eyes blazed with crimson energy, omega beams lancing toward the Primarch. Guilliman raised the hand of Dominion, the ancient power fist intercepting the beams. For a moment it seemed the artifact weapon might withstand the attack, its energy field flaring against the omega effect. Then the gauntlet began to disintegrate. Atoms erased from existence as the beams overcame its defenses. Guilliman discarded the failing weapon and pressed his attack, moving inside the range of the omega beams. The Emperor's sword struck again and again, each blow leaving wounds in Darkseid's form that leaked the strange shadow energy. The new god responded with blows of his own, fists hammering against the armor of fate with force that would have pulverized ordinary Terminator plate. "Your father," Darkseid said as they fought, "achieved much with primitive tools. His psychic potential approaches that of a new god, yet he squandered it, maintaining a failing empire rather than ascending to true godhood." "The Emperor sacrificed for humanity," Guilliman replied, turning aside a blow that would have crushed his skull. "A concept beyond your comprehension, creature." Their battle raged across the transformed surface of Cadia, each blow changing the landscape around them. Where Guilliman struck, the Emperor's power pushed back Darkseid's transformations, returning sections to their original state. Where Darkseid's fists connected with the ground, Reality rewrote itself in geometric patterns of oppressive order. Above them, the planet killer continued its targeting sequence, energy building toward the shot that would destroy Terra. Guilliman was aware of the threat, but could not disengage from Darkseid without exposing himself to a fatal blow. The new god had positioned himself perfectly, ensuring that the Primarch could not interfere with his weapons operation. "Your tactics are sound," Darkseid acknowledged as they fought, "but incomplete. You fight to protect. I fight to rule. My victory is inevitable because I have calculated all variables, including this one." His hand shot out, not at Guilliman, but at the fallen form of Canoness Vera. Before the Primarch could intervene, Darkseid had lifted the Sister of Battle by her throat, holding her broken form before him as a shield. "The flaw in your father's design." Darkseid continued. "Compassion, inefficient, exploitable." Guilliman hesitated, the Emperor's sword halting mid-swing. In that moment of pause, Darkseid struck, his fist connecting with the Primarch's chest with enough force to crack even the armour of fate. Guilliman staggered back, momentarily winded, and Darkseid pressed his advantage. The new god hurled the Canoness aside and unleashed the full power of the Omega effect. Twin beams of annihilation struck Guilliman directly, bypassing his armour's energy field to connect with the transhuman flesh beneath. The Primarch roared in pain as the beam seared through his body, erasing matter at the atomic level. Had the Emperor's sword not absorbed a portion of the attack, Guilliman might have been erased entirely. Instead, he remained standing, though gravely wounded. The armour of Fate's systems pumped combat stimulants and regenerative compounds into his system, fighting to counteract damage on a scale it had never encountered. A worthy experiment, Darkseid observed, but concluded, "The planet killer is ready. Terror will fall, and with it, the psychic battery that powers your Imperium. What follows will be a more perfect order, might Border, Guilliman, despite his wounds, raise the Emperor's sword once more. While I draw breath, while a single human heart beats in defiance, your victory is not assured." "Defiance," Darkseid repeated. Another variable accounted for in the equation. He turned toward the dimensional breach, raising his hand to give the command that would fire the planet killer. Guilliman summoned his remaining strength, charging forward in a last desperate attack. Before either could act, a new presence made itself known. The broken form of Canoness Vera rose from the ground, her armour shattered and her body failing, yet surrounded by a golden nimbus of power that grew with each passing moment. "Emperor," she whispered, "receive your daughter." The nimbus expanded exponentially, enveloping her completely. When it faded, the Canoness was gone, consumed by the psychic fire of her own faith. In her place stood a figure of blinding golden light, feminine in form, but transcendent in nature. Living St. Guilliman breathed, recognizing the phenomenon that had occurred only a handful of times in Imperial history. The saint that had been Canoness Vera floated above the transformed ground, fiery wings of pure psychic energy spreading from her back. In her hand materialized a spear of golden light, its tip burning with the concentrated faith of billions of Imperial citizens. "Faith," the saint spoke, her voice carrying the echoes of countless believers. "The final variable your equation cannot account for. Abomination." Darkseid turned to face this new threat, his expression finally showing genuine surprise. The Emperor's power projected through a willing vessel, a phenomenon not present in my reality. The saint did not respond with words, but with action. She held her spear of light with perfect accuracy, the weapon striking Darkseid in the chest, at the exact point where Guilliman's sword had wounded him earlier. Unlike the physical weapons that had come before, this spear of pure faith and psychic energy sank completely into the new god's form, erupting from his back in a blaze of golden fire. Darkseid staggered, truly wounded for the first time. The shadow energy that served as his blood poured from the wound, evaporating into nothingness as it contacted the saint's power. "Impossible," he stated, the certainty in his voice wavering for the first time. "The equation accounts for all variables, not faith," the saint replied. "Faith transcends mathematics. Faith defies certainty. Faith is the fire that burns in the darkness when all other lights have failed." She descended toward Guilliman, her radiance washing over the wounded Primarch. Where the golden light touched his injuries, the atomic devastation of the Omega effect receded, wounds closing and armour reknitting. The Primarch rose to his full height once more, the Emperor's sword blazing with renewed purpose in his hand. "The Emperor protects," Guilliman stated, not as a prayer, but as an immutable fact. Darkseid reached into the wound in his chest, grasping the spear of light that impaled him. His stone fingers closed around the psychic construct, attempting to extinguish it through sheer force of will. The spear flickered but did not fade, its power maintained by the collective faith of humanity channeled through the Saint. "A miscalculation," Darkseid admitted. "This universe operates on principles different from my own. Faith is a tangible force rather than a control mechanism, an interesting variable that requires further study." He pulled the spear from his chest with a single wrenching motion, dark energy pouring from the wound. The weapon dissolved in his grasp, its purpose fulfilled. Though injured, Darkseid remained standing, his implacable presence undeenish despite the injury. "But faith alone cannot save you," he continued. "The planet killer remains. Terror will fall. The equation will be completed above them." Through the dimensional breach, the planet killer pulsed with built-up energy, ready to unleash destruction across interstellar distances. Darkseid raised his hand once more to give the command. The Saint turned her gaze upward, golden light pouring from her eyes to strike the alien weapon. For a moment it seemed her power might not be enough to counter such massive technology. Then Guilliman joined his strength to hers, raising the Emperor's sword toward the dimensional breach. The blade blazed with such intensity that it rivaled the Saint's radiance. Father and son united in purpose through the Primarch's weapon. For the Emperor, Guilliman in for humanity. The combined psychic assault struck the planet killer at its power core, golden light burning through alien alloys and impossible geometries. The weapon shuddered as conflicting energies warred within it, fluctuating wavelengths of power that should never have existed in the same reality. Darkseid watched this development with narrowed eyes. Impressive. Your combined faith temporarily disrupts the weapon's targeting systems, but faith is finite. My power is eternal. He raised both hands, channeling the Omega effect not as a destructive beam, but as a stabilizing force, attempting to counter the psychic assault on his weapon. Three powers contested the fate of terror, the Saint's pure faith, Guilliman's connection to the Emperor through his sword, and Darkseid's absolute cosmic authority. Reality itself groaned under the strain, the dimensional breach fluctuating as laws of physics from two universes clashed. On Cadia's broken surface, the surviving Imperial forces and even the Chaos Warbands found themselves united in witnessing a conflict beyond mortal comprehension. As the three powers reached stalemate, a fourth force entered the equation. From the depths of the Eye of Terror came a psychic scream of such magnitude that even non-psychers clutched their heads in agony. The Chaos Gods, sensing a threat to their very existence, had finally mobilized their full attention. The swirling mass of the Eye pulsed with malevolent purpose. Tendrils of warp energy extended toward the dimensional breach, not to attack Darkseid directly, but to assess this new cosmic rival. Where the tendrils touched the edges of the breach, reality spasmed as fundamentally opposing forces interacted. The ruinous powers awaken. Guilliman observed his enhanced transhuman senses, allowing him to perceive the warp manipulation. They recognize you as a threat to their dominion. Chaos, Darkseid stated. Entropy given consciousness. The antithesis of the order I bring. Another variable to be accounted for. The Saint hovered between the Primarch and the new god, her radiance highlighting the fundamental differences between them. Three forces contest for humanity's soul. Chaos seeks to corrupt it. You seek to enslave it. The Emperor seeks to preserve it. Darkseid considered this assessment an inefficient paradigm. Under my rule, there would be no contest, only certainty. A dead certainty, Guilliman countered. Humanity thrives on choice, on free will. Your equation offers neither. Free will is an illusion, Darkseid replied. One I have disproven mathematically. All beings serve something. Your Emperor, the Chaos Gods, or Darkseid. The difference is merely one of efficiency. As they spoke, the tendrils from the Eye of Terror grew more substantial, probing the dimensional breach with increasing urgency. The planet killer continued to build power, though its targeting was disrupted by the combined psychic assault of the Saint and Guilliman. Darkseid assessed the shifting balance of forces with calculating eyes. A strategic withdrawal is indicated. This universe requires further study before implementation of the final solution. You retreat? Guilliman asked, the Emperor's sword still raised toward the dimensional breach. Tactical redeployment, Darkseid corrected. This incursion was merely reconnaissance, a test of variables and constants. I have gathered sufficient data. He gestured, and the dimensional breach began to contract, the planet killer withdrawing into the reality of Apocalypse. The transformed landscape of Cadia trembled as Darkseid's influence receded, brutal geometric patterns giving way to the natural ruins of the fortress world. "Remember this, son of the Emperor," Darkseid stated. "I have tasted your reality now. I have measured its strengths and catalogued its weaknesses. When I return, it will be with the full might of Apocalypse. The final solution will be implemented. All will know that Darkseid Island." Before Guilliman could respond, a boom tube opened behind the new god, a swirling tunnel of energy unlike any warp portal or webway gate. Darkseid stepped backward into the tube, his wounds already beginning to close as he returned to his native reality. "The anti-life equation remains," he said as his form began to fade. "Those touched by it are forever mine, seeds planted for my return." The boom tube closed with a thunderclap of displaced air, leaving Guilliman and the Saints standing on the wounded surface of Cadia. Around them, Imperial forces and Chaos warbands alike struggled to comprehend what they had witnessed. The dimensional breach sealed entirely, Apocalypse vanishing from the skies above Cadia. But the Eye of Terror remained, and within its impossible depths the Chaos gods stirred with new purpose. They had sensed Darkseid's nature, had tasted the anti-life equation, and recognized both the threat and the opportunity it presented. The Saint turned to Guilliman, her radiance already beginning to fade as the immediate threat receded. "He will return. Then we will be ready," the Primarch replied, sheathing the Emperor's sword. "Humanity has faced would-be gods before. We endure." The Saint nodded, her form becoming increasingly translucent as the psychic energy that maintained her manifestation dispersed. The Canoness gave her life willingly, but her sacrifice must not be in vain. Warned the Emperor, warned terror. The equation spreads even now. Guilliman looked across the battlefield where Imperial survivors gathered around the fallen bodies of their comrades. Among the living, he noted with concern, some bore the faint traces of mathematical formulas etched into their skin symbols of the anti-life equation, taking root in their minds. "Brother Guilliman," came a voice from behind him. Captain Drava of the Ultramarines approached, his armour battle-damaged, but his bearing still proud. "The Emperor's redemption has been cleansed of the alien influence, but many of the crew show signs of mental contamination. They speak of an equation that proves life is meaningless. Quarantine protocols. Captain Guilliman ordered full isolation for anyone showing symptoms. Chaplain oversight at all times. We must contain this before it spreads beyond the Cadian Gate." The Saint's form had almost completely faded now, only a ghostly outline remaining. "Faith is the counter to his equation, Lord Guilliman. Where certainty offers despair, faith offers hope. Remember this when he returns." With those final words, the manifestation dissipated entirely, golden light scattering like stardust across the battlefield before fading into nothingness. Where Convera had fallen, only her shattered armour remained, the body within consumed by the psychic fire of her transformation. Guilliman knelt beside the empty armour, placing his hand upon the ebon shroud iconography on its breastplate. "Your sacrifice is noted, Canoness. The Emperor knows your name." He rose and surveyed the ruined landscape, tactical assessments already forming in his transhuman mind. "Captain D, establish a perimeter. Gather all survivors, Imperial and Chaos alike. I would know how many have been touched by this equation." "The traitors as well, my lord," Dre asked, surprise evident in his voice. "All of them," Guilliman confirmed. "What we face today transcends the war between Chaos and Imperium. If this entity returns, we may need every resource at our disposal to resist." As Imperial forces moved to comply with the Primarch's orders, Guilliman turned his gaze toward the swirling mass of the Eye of Terror. Its patterns had changed subtly, the warp storms within it showing new configurations that his pattern recognition skills identified as Nent mathematical sequences. "He touched them too," Guilliman murmured. "The Chaos gods have tasted the anti-life equation, another variable none of us could have predicted. Within hours, Imperial quarantine protocols were in effect throughout the Cadian system. The survivors were separated into groups based on levels of exposure to Darkseid's influence, with chaplain and commissars monitoring for signs of the equation's spread. Astropathic communications were sent to Terra, coded warnings that spoke of a new threat. Neither Xenos nor Chaos, but something that transcended both. Aboard the Emperor's Redemption, now restored to Imperial control, Gilman stood on the observation deck, watching as Lance batteries systematically destroyed any vessels too heavily corrupted by Darkseid's influence to be recovered. Each flash of weapons fire illuminated his stern features, highlighting the weight of command that had never felt heavier. "My lord," reported Magos Dominus Veneratus, who had joined the quarantine effort from Stegister 7. Preliminary analysis of the mathematical sequences left behind by the entity suggests a pattern of unparalleled complexity. It appears to be self-replicating with incompatible neural architectures, much like a mimetic virus. "Can it be contained?" Gilman asked. "Unknown," the Magos admitted, mechadendrites writhing in agitation. "The Omega pattern defies conventional logic. It operates on principles that the Mechanicus has no record of despite archives dating back to old Earth. What of the survivors who have been exposed? Those with strong faith show greater resistance," Veneratus reported. "Sisters of Battle particularly seem capable of withstanding initial infection through focused prayer. Astartes resist through sheer mental discipline, though not indefinitely. Unaugmented humans without significant faith fall quickest." Gilliman processed this information with rapid efficiency. Then faith is indeed the counter. The saint was correct. Faith. Or possibly its mathematical opposite, the Magos suggested. If the anti-life equation proves that life equals futility, perhaps there exists a life equation that proves the opposite. "A theory to pursue," Gilman acknowledged. "Commit whatever resources necessary to this research. If Darkseid returns, we must have a defense beyond faith alone." As the quarantine efforts continued, strange phenomena began to manifest throughout the system. Imperial crew reported dreams of perfect geometric patterns that remained burned into their vision upon waking. Servitors suddenly developed errant behaviors, reciting mathematical sequences before their machine spirits failed entirely. Most disturbing were the reports from Sister Superior Amity, one of the few survivors of Canine's Vera's squad, who claimed to hear the canoness's voice in her prayers, speaking not of the Emperor's light, but of an equation that promised freedom from pain through submission. Within the warp, these disturbances created ripples that spread outward from the Cadian Gate. Navigator houses across the Imperium reported difficulties plotting courses near the region, describing unprecedented mathematical certainties appearing within the chaotic tides of the immaterium. On Terra itself, the Astronomicon flickered for a fraction of a second, a phenomenon that had not occurred since the birth of the Great Rift. In the Golden Throne, the Emperor stirred. His decaying physical form remained unchanged, but those psychers sensitive enough to perceive the master of mankind's thoughts detected. A new current of concern emanating from his undying consciousness. The custodes standing eternal vigil reported that the Emperor's psychic corona had shifted subtly, incorporating new patterns that resembled complex mathematical formula. The Emperor had sensed Darkseid's presence and recognized the threat the new god represented, not merely to humanity, but to the very nature of reality within the materium. Through his psychic link to Gilliman, the Emperor communicated a singular warning, a concept rather than words that the Primarch interpreted with growing concern. "The equation is not contained," Gilliman announced to his gathered advisors days later. "It spreads through the warp itself, touching minds across the Imperium. The Emperor has confirmed what we feared. This entity, this Darkseid, represents a threat beyond anything we have faced before." Captain Draveret, still bearing the psychic scars of his encounter with the new god, spoke up. "How do we fight an equation, my lord? How do we combat an idea that infects the mind through mathematical proof?" "With a stronger idea," Gilman replied. "With faith, yes, but also with purpose. The anti-life equation proves that life equals futility, that resistance is mathematically impossible. We must provide the counterproof through our actions. Every victory against chaos, every world defended, every human life preserved becomes a variable that disproves his equation." The gathered commanders nodded, though uncertainty remained in their eyes. They had faced countless threats to the Imperium heretics, Xenos, demons, but never before had they been asked to fight a mathematical concept. "Spread the word throughout the Imperium," Gilman continued. "All psychers are to be monitored for signs of mathematical corruption. The Inquisition will establish new protocols for identifying and containing equation carriers. The Mechanicus will develop countermeasures against mimetic infection. and the ecclesiarchy must redouble its efforts to strengthen the faith of every imperial citizen. As the commanders dispersed to implement these orders, Gilman remained on the observation deck, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. Somewhere beyond the veil between realities, Darkseid waited, studying the data gathered during his incursion, preparing for his return. The Primarch's transhuman mind calculated probabilities, strategies, contingencies. Yet he knew that conventional warfare would not be enough against such an enemy. Faith against certainty, he murmured, recalling his exchange with a new god, an experiment worth conducting indeed. In the darkness between stars, in the cold void where even the Emperor's light struggled to reach, the first whispers of the anti-life equation took root in desperate minds. On worlds ravaged by war, in underhives choked with despair among populations already teetering on the edge of surrender, Darkseid's mathematical proof of futility found fertile ground, and deep within the Eye of Terror, the Chaos Gods watched with alien interest as a new game unfolded. They had tasted Darkseid's power, had sensed the anti-life equation's potential, and recognized both the threat and the opportunity it presented. For if the equation could subjugate reality to perfect order, could it not also be inverted to create perfect chaos? On the broken fields of Cadia, where blood and faith had mingled with the cold certainty of Darkseid's power, a new pillar of blackstone rose unbidden from the shattered earth. Unlike the ancient pylons that had once held back the Eye of Terror, this monolith bore geometric patterns that hurt the mind to observe formula that whispered of inevitability and submission. The first herald of Darkseid had been planted in Imperial space. The new god would return. The final solution would be implemented. All would know that Darkseid Island. But until that day, humanity would prepare. Faith against certainty, hope against mathematical proof, free will against the anti-life equation. The experiment would continue, and its outcome would determine the fate not just of the Imperium, but of reality itself.